So, in this video, we are quickly going to go through Unity. So, we're going to do a quick walkthrough of the software itself, creating a project, 2D project. We're going to quickly run through the user interface. So, that's typically a boring part, but we're going to keep it pretty quick to the point, and we're going to see the things that are interesting to us. So we're going to get to create a game object then. So these are the things that are going to make up our games. We'll have a run through all the parts that are associated with that. And then finally, we're going to actually get some assets into our game. We want to see something up on the screen. So you have the opportunity there to create two types of assets, an image and then an animated image. And I'll kind of give you an example and you'll be able to run through it then yourselves. So let's get straight into it. So in the previous video, I'd have asked you to install Unity Hub, and through that then install a version of Unity along with Visual Studio. So if you start Unity Hub, you can verify in your installs here. You might see 2020 or 2019, whichever one you had chosen to pick. I'm probably going to use 2019 myself. Just as 2020 is a little bit slow starting up and that kind of stuff. So no major differences between them. So you can create whatever game you like in any one of these versions, and it'll open up fine in any of the other ones that you see here listed then as well. So I'm going to go to my projects here, and you might not see anything. I do have other projects created. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to pick the version that I want to create a new project with. And we can see the options that we're given here. So it's automatically going to default to 3D, but we don't want that. We want 2D here. We're going to start off with 2D. We will eventually get to actually doing some 3D stuff, but we want to keep it nice and simple starting off. So if you have 3D selected, unfortunately, it'll change the way that certain assets are imported and that kind of stuff, and the way the cameras are set up. So we want to keep it at 2D for ourselves. So I'm going to give this project a name of Introduction. And to note that you can actually change the location here if you want to save it somewhere else. I'll keep it all mine together. Just be aware of that there. We might find ways to navigate to it later on, because we do want to have access to where the actual files are stored. So I'm going to click Create, and that is it. Unity is now going to start up and create a new project for us. So when it starts up, it's going to give us a scene, fully created. There's only going to be a camera in the scene. This scene's like a level. That's the easiest way to think about it. So you can do loads of different stuff in here. You can create menus for your games. You can create individual levels for it. You can even stream levels in on top of each other, so you can make up larger levels from like smaller individual files and that kind of stuff. Unity itself, completely free to download. You can look into their terms then as well to see how they actually make their money. Same goes for Unreal Engine, completely free to download then as well. So they're the kind of our two main ones that are available to us. They're of interest really, starting off. So Unity, very, very easy to learn to program and to actually make games in. Unreal Engine, I'd say a bit more of a steeper learning curve associated with it. So once you're happy in Unreal Engine, that you know how you're, sorry, in Unity, that you know your general way around, you can have a look at Unreal Engine then as well. We might even take a look at it in one of the final videos here. And I will say, generally, not this slow starting up. Here we go. And we're in, and this is the default layout for Unity. So when our project is created, this is the default that we're going to see inside in Unity, and we're going to try and customize this a little bit. So we're going to keep this kind of quick. So for instance, what we have, firstly, up the very, very top here, we have these tabs. So I have scene and I have game, that is kind of written to me here. So the scene view is everything that I can kind of see down inside here. This is where we're designing our level. This is where everything's been kind of placed and laid out. So beside that then we have our game, and in the exact same kind of space that it's taken up, this is what our actual game is going to look like if it were to play it. It's just going to show us a static kind of preview of it. Now a key thing that we want to kind of change here inside our game view that is going to affect our level layout is the aspect ratio. So at the moment it says free aspect, so whatever kind of scale this big window is here, that's going to define what your camera can view. So if you're going to change the camera aspect ratio later on, things might get cut off, or you might be seeing things that you don't want them to see. So we're going to pick a standard aspect ratio of 16:9, so widescreen TV. And we might see some black bars, and that's absolutely fine. So if the resolution here or the aspect ratio is bigger than 16:9, it'll just show it up as black bars. We won't notice any difference over here. The only thing is this box is around. This kind of camera icon is never going to change in size now. Okay, so it's always going to have this shape to it. So that is our scene and our game view. So we want to talk about the objects that are actually placed in it. So right now there's just one. So I'm going to click on it here inside the scene view. I can see I've got a little bit of a preview down here because it is a camera. And then all the way over here, On the left hand side, we have our hierarchy tab. And this is where all the objects in your game will show up, kind of down in a list down here. So right now we just have the one that's in here, and that is our main camera. So we're going to take a quick look at it. It is over in another window inside here, and this is called our inspector. And this is probably one of the most important windows in the game, or in the game engine, I should say. So we're going to take a look at this one a little bit later, but note this is our inspector, and as we select objects inside in our scene, we're going to be able to kind of customize them and tweak their different properties through the inspector. Okay, so we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into that later on. Just to note that this guy here is what we would call a game object. So everything that goes into a scene, into a level in Unity, is a game object. Everything's pretty much the exact same. The only differences between them are a name, a tag, and then the different types of components that we've added to them. So the camera has a transform and a camera, and later on we're going to see loads of different types of components then as well. So from this then, finally, down the bottom here, we have our actual assets. So we can see that here. That's this big, massive window. Okay, so we're going to customize this just a little bit. We're going to see behind here, then there's another guy called a console. Going to be important later. We're probably going to see errors. We want to be able to view them all the time and be able to fix them. Okay, because that's going to be part of this relay. Okay, so first things first, let's start to move this around. So I'm going to expand this a little bit. I'm going to take my console guy and I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to take my inspector. So I'm always going to be selecting objects and then modifying them. So I want to keep these two kind of close together. So I'm dragging it over here. So now my camera and my game scene is all, I should say my game view and my scene view is now kept over here. Objects over here, and then my inspector for all those objects perfectly right beside them. Another thing about your scene down here, you have the choice of whether or not you want these to be showing up as folders. So if you look right down the very, very bottom down here, there's this little slider. We can use this to change the scale of the objects inside in here. So if you want like really big icons, you can blow it up like that. Or if you like a list view, which is probably preferred when we're looking for stuff later on, we can kind of scale it down this way to the left. Okay, I think we're good to go on this. So that is our basic introduction to moving ourselves around in Unity. Just to note, I did miss out on right-clicking. I'm holding my right mouse button here and just moving around. So right-click is just a select, or should say pan, to move the camera. We don't need to worry about rotations or anything because we're in a 2D game. So we're stuck on this XY axis. So let's have a look at creating a game object. So I am right-clicking on my scene hierarchy over here, and I'm going to select create empty. And we're going to see what we're going to get here. So we will get rid of that tooltip. And this is our inspector view for the game object I just created. So we want to take a look at this first. So you can see a little bit of a checkbox here. That's just whether or not this object is turned on or off. So if you want to make something invisible, that's just a 3D model or 2D thing, you can just turn it on and off very easily through code. We have a name here, and preferably this would be unique, but you could have thousands of objects in a level then as well, so this isn't a reliable way for us to identify stuff later on. Just to know about it. It's just like a friendly display name for us to kind of see here. One thing we're very interested in is this tag guy. So later on, if we want to have interactions between objects or we want to find an object, using the tag is a preferred way of doing it. So it's just kind of like a categorization that we can apply to different game objects. So if I'm going to have 200 different types of enemies, well, I can just have one tag called enemy that's assigned to all of them. So when we interact with them, they're kind of treated in the same way initially. Just beneath it then here, this is a completely different section of the inspector. This is where we get to see our components that are added to it. So we had seen our camera previously, and the camera had a transformation right up the very, very top. It also had another component after it called a camera script, or whatever it was going to be. So for this game object that we just created, there's nothing in it, we're all given this transformation. So we're always given a transform component. You can't remove it. It is required. So if we're putting an object inside in a game, so a two-dimensional game that we're making, we have to give it a position. We have to have some way for the actual application to know where that object is. So we are making a 2D game, so we have two coordinates that we're interested in, the X and the Y, but there is also another axis here for the Z axis, and I can kind of see it on the left-hand side over here. We're never really going to use this. It doesn't really matter to us how far away an object is in the background, so we're going to end up setting this to be like 0 or something like that, okay? And then our X and our Y, this is how we're going to move it basically left and right using our X axis, and then up and down using our Y axis. And we're good to go. So what do we see then when we're inside in here? I have that game object selected. I can just see this little dot that's kind of showing up this side here. So I'm going to select it again, and then up the very, very, very top hand corner, we're going to get these sets of controls here that allow us to control how we're interacting with objects inside in the Unity scene and how we kind of move things around then as well. So we have like movement, rotation, scale, and then there's like a do all kind of one, which is the one we have selected here. So for instance, if I select the position one, I can see that I can actually move this, and I can see my position, my X, my Y is changing. Okay, remember I said we're just on the X and the Y axis. I can come in here, I can set that to 0. I can set all of them to 0 manually if I like. And we can see this now returned to the origin of our 2D game space, which is slap bang in the center here. So I'm going to drag it up just a little bit. What if we want to add in like a visual element to this object? Well, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using add component. And these are all the different categories of components then that Unity is going to kind of provide to us. So there's a lot in it, but we're going to kind of work our way through this, the kind of core ones that we want. So I want to see something on the screen. So let's say we need something called a sprite renderer. Okay, we need something that's going to be able to draw a sprite. And in games terminology, a sprite really is just an image. That's it. So we're going to load it in. I've added this new component to it. It's added quite a bit of stuff into the actual game. But if we see what we have here, so this is the entire sprite renderer. So everything inside this box is its properties that we're allowed to modify and set up however we like. The ones that we're really interested in here are going to be sprite and color. So what image are we going to use? And then what color are you going to make that image? And they're kind of optional as well for the color, but you do have to have an image that we want to fill in. Another kind of important one, order and layer. So if we want to set up later on that we want to have objects showing up in front of the player or behind the player in a 2D kind of setting, we can come in here, we can modify this to make sure. So that's always going to happen. So what we want to do here is we want to get a sprite for this. Obviously, do Unity provide us any default ones? They do. So I clicked on that little circle guy right beside where it says sprite, and you can pick whatever you like out of here. Okay, we're just going to use it as like a sample. So this one should call UI sprite. So I'm going to select him, so I can double click on it, and I can now see that that sprite box has been filled in. So I can zoom in here, I can see it's absolutely tiny. But what about we mess around with the size of it? So we have two options. We can either use our scale that we have right here, and we can kind of be real manual about it and kind of type it all in, or we can come up to our scale tool up the very, very top, and then I can scale it however I want. I suppose there'll be a few bits to this. We'll see if I hold down the shift key. No, that doesn't do it. Okay, we can kind of scale it up. Let's see here. I'll just manually type it in. 1010. Bingo. There's our sprite. So if we click on our game preview, this is what we would see if our game was running. We can even test what our game is going to look like while it's actually running. There's a play button right up the very, very top here. We're going to click on that. And bingo. We're seeing the exact same thing that we've seen previously, but the game is running now. So one thing to be very, very cautious here is that I'm free to come in here while the game is running, and I can click one of these game objects, and I'm going to change the color of this guy. I can change it to red. Okay, and you're like, okay, you do a load of changes to a load of objects while the game is running. You stop it running, everything's gone back the way it was. Okay, so that is just the default behavior of it. You can go in and kind of change this, but we're going to work under the assumption that only leave the game playing while you're testing it, doing quick run throughs, and you can kind of tweak values in and that kind of stuff, but we'll try and not do too much in one kind of session while we're actually playing it. Okay, so we got our game object done, we got our sprite renderer all kind of put into it. How about we try and maybe bring in our own kind of custom ones? Oh, I should actually, before we jump on, there's the rotation we can look at here, so while we're at it. So by selecting the rotation tool at the top left corner here, I'm able to kind of change the rotation of my object, and we can see that the only axis that's actually changing when we're doing this is the Z axis. Okay, so we can see everything that's changed here now. My position on the Y has gone up. My scale is now 1010 to make it bigger, and I've now rotated it 38 degrees here. So that's all stored inside my transformation. So you have the two options, do it manually inside this box here if you're kind of comfortable with that, or you can always go up the very, very top here and play around with these tool sets to get it shaped whatever way you want then as well. Okay, yeah, so we'll move on and we'll try and get some actual images kind of brought in here. So I have provided one image that you'll be able to download, and it's called white.png. So I'm going to just simply drag and drop that into Unity, and that's it, we're done. So this is just an image, that's it. So when you select it by default down here in Unity, it's just going to give us some options that we're not going to mess around with this one. It's just a single image, it's just white, nothing else. So let's try dragging it in. You can just bring it into your scene, drag and drop it in. We can see on my scene hierarchy view is now showing up as white. It has all the kind of similar kind of components that we had seen before. It has a transform, it has a position where I left it. Everything else is just left the way it is. It has a sprite renderer just like we created the last time around. The only difference here is that it is using an image that we had brought in custom. Okay, that's it. So we use a built-in one provided by Unity for the first one, and then we've just imported our own image here then as well. So let's say we want to play around with this image a little bit. So there was the tool, the optional tool that I'd shown called paint.net in the first video, and this is the part where we're going to use it. So if you have a Mac or a Linux machine, just know you can use GIMP, and it'll provide pretty much the exact same UI or close enough, and the similar feature sets. We're going to be doing very, very basic image editing, and if you're not interested in it, you can skip over it, I suppose. So I am actually going to open up this image inside in paint.net. So I'm going to right click on it here inside Unity, and I'm going to go show in Explorer. And it's actually going to show me the PNG file that I have right here. So I'm going to right click on it, I'm going to say open with, and I'll go paint.net. And note you can start paint.net and you can drag and drop this in. So I'm just going to start it as a shortcut down here. So I can have paint.net running, and I can just drag in that white.png, and I click on open. So we can minimize this down. So I'm using my control key here and my mouse wheel to zoom in on the image. This is the image that we have currently in Unity, so we'll try and mess around a little bit with it here. So we're going to take a look at the setup that I have kind of going on. We're really only interested in 3 bits here. Up the middle, I'll just start with, is the tools that we have available to us. So we have like a rectangle selection, we have like a lasso where you can kind of draw around the points that you want. We have an ellipse or a circle. Magic wand, where we might use something like this later on to kind of magically select the pixels that match the same color or similar to it. Paint bucket, we got a gradient, we got brushes, erasers, right? Pretty kind of similar to Microsoft Paint or Photoshop or any of those kind of tools. Up here we got our colors. So we got all our color wheel here. We can pick whatever basic colors that we want. We have our primary and our secondary colors, which is the black and the white guy here. So one's your left click, one's your right click, and you can kind of assign different colors to it. You can go into more detail by clicking on the more tab then as well. I know the key bit is going to be our layers guy down here, and this is what we're going to start off messing around with. So before I do absolutely anything in it, I am going to show one difference between image types to kind of get us going. So you may have heard of a JPEG. You may not have heard of a PNG. So what you're opening here is a PNG. That is what I've provided, and I'm going to show you why we're actually going to use this. So I am going to use my rectangle selection tool, and you don't have to follow along to this. I'm just going to cut this out. Okay, I'm then going to save that. I'm going to save it as something new. It's going to save to my desktop. Yeah, we can overwrite the original there. And then I'm going to save another one, but it is going to be as a JPEG. So now when I go to my desktop, I can see white.jpg here. When I double click on it, it shows up as a white square. If I go to white.png, whenever the window viewer decides it wants to work, let's try this one. Typical. Well, The only one we're interested in is our actual JPEG here. So we'll see there's no hole in the center. It's not filled in. Well, sorry, it has been filled in with just white. And if I come back in here and I just fill in the entire thing here with some crazy color, and then I save that. Apologies about this. We can see the transparent bit, the bit that I've actually cut out here in the center, is filled in white. So this is the only thing that we're really interested with a JPEG, is that there's no transparency supports here. Okay, so we can't have transparency with a JPEG. So if you want to have transparency in your pixels, whether for a UI or for characters or whatever it's going to be, we can't use JPEG. That's why I'm using PNG, and PNG also has like lossless compression, so that it should technically look nicer. So that white one that I had earlier, so I've deleted everything here with Control A, and we're just going to paint in whatever we want basically. So the idea that I'm going to go for here is we're going to create like a medical crate or something that can be used in a game where we can collect it and our character gains health or ammo or whatever we kind of want to get out of it. So I'm going to do a basic run through and then I'm going to ask you to go ahead and create your own kind of custom one. So I'm just going to show you the kind of basic flow that I would have for using this tool, show you some of the key tools that are involved in it really quickly, and then let you mess around with it and come back and see what you get. So I am going to go for like a crate or a bag. I wasn't too sure what I go for, but we'll go for the crate, it'll be the easiest. So we'll say it's going to be kind of made out of wood or something, so I'll have a background maybe similar to this. I think then I would probably cut in here. So I picked a rectangular selection tool there. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'd maybe make this a darker color, or at least try and get a darker color. Okay, so I use the paint bucket to fill it in, and then it kind of shows up a little bit better. We'll make it red. That is absolutely terrible. I'll fill this in red here. What I really want to show is the layers. So down here I'm going to click on add layer, and I will add in a second box here. Okay, and then I'll fill this guy in red. Red. Okay, so in the center then I'm just going to put in a very simple cross symbol. Make sure that's white. Okay, I'm still using the rectangle tool. I'm just going to paint it in like this. Okay, so I can see here then I have my layer set up, layer 1, layer 2. I probably should have done the cross in the third layer on top of this. I don't really like the background color either, so thankfully I put that into the layer so we can change the color of that. Kind of do want it to jump out. Maybe the white is going to be good. Okay, I'll leave the white there. So white background, and then I got that kind of cross laid out there then as well. Now note you can put in loads of different layers here, so you can keep on adding layers, add a bit in the top of it if you don't like the way something looks. So let's just put in something that we're not going to like. Blue here, and draw across that. You're like, right, well that doesn't look great. You can actually just turn off the layer. The little checkbox beside that will do it for you. You can also rearrange the layers around however you like, just by simply dragging them. And of course you can delete layers then as well with the delete button. So I'd say we're kind of done here. So Paint.net will save into its own format then as well. So if you go to like to save, it'll show up as a PDN. So if you want to be able to open it back up and edit the layers, this is how you would save it. Now the thing about this is we want to save this out as a PNG. And if we go to do that, it's going to ask us to flatten it. So I just clicked on the flatten button right down here. It's kind of unhighlighted now, but it was this guy right there. That will flatten these layers together. Now when I go to save it, it shows up with a few different image types for us. So just make sure you select on PNG, and then you're good to go. So I'm going to save it as help, and I'll click on OK. So it's this point I would ask you to go and actually go and create your art asset for this. So use Paint.net, use GIMP, use Photoshop if that's something that you're comfortable using. But we'll try and create health, ammo, create something small, like a little chest, something that you could pick up inside in the game.